a guy that I would just like just a hair. Yeah. I just want to be able to see it flow when I kind of slam his arm down.
Here's Drake Toll.
Welcome back into the Petty Clinic Low T Bears Den. Drake Toll alongside Armstrong, Sims, Andrew Robertson, Jack McKenzie, and Marquise Cooley today. Happy Monday, folks. Rounding out and starting your 1 o'clock hour today, talking some hoops. I know we've had a tennis show today. We're joined now by Matthew Postins of Heartland College Sports. Matthew, are you a big men's collegiate tennis guy?
Admittedly, I am not. But I know that Baylor had a pretty big weekend last weekend. So did the University of Texas women's team. They won a national championship. So, but no, I don't follow it on a regular basis, unfortunately. I noticed you on Twitter were doing your best to try and convert tennis for football, which was interesting to watch.
There was it took a lot of effort to try to. There's not really a metric that would make the two. I mean, your conversion there is really tough, but I tried my best, and I realized a lot of Baylor fans don't know very much at all about tennis, and I would have been in that corner if it had been 3 months ago. But we're I guess Baylor's a tennis school now. Is that kind of how this should go?
I guess so. You win a championship or you get close to a championship. Yeah, you're a fill in the blank sports school.
Lock it in. Baylor's part men's basketball, part tennis, judging by the course of this year. Well, Matthew, outside of that, you've got really what Baylor's been able to put together. We talked about the transfers and how well with James Akinjo and now Dale Bonner that Scott Drew has reloaded with this team, losing a good group of seniors and guys that have pro aspirations, but we discussed this probably a couple weeks ago, and it's still on top of everybody's mind, and that's the fact that we're now less than 1 week away from the NBA declaration deadline, and Jared Butler has been silent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I noticed that last night. I did my kind of my weekend check. Once the season ends, I'm following kids, Twitter, Instagram, whatever, to try to see if they declare. And Jared is the one guy who has been very silent. Graduated from Baylor on the 9th, got his number retired at his high school, but he's been largely quiet on social media aside from those two things. And you're right, the deadline's the 30th. They've got to declare by then. I still believe firmly that at some point in the next few days he will declare for the draft, because the last CBS Sports mock draft that I saw, they had Butler going to the Warriors at number 19. I think he's a solid first-round pick at this point. I think he could be a good fit for a team that is already a contender. That seems to be kind of where he's falling in mock drafts right now. So if he is debating it at this point, he's debating something that we haven't thought of. Usually it's about, I've done everything I can do in college. Maybe I need to go to the pros to take care of my family. Maybe I'm just ready to move on to the next stage of my life. He's technically has 2 years of eligibility left. So there must be something that he's rolling over in his mind that we haven't thought of yet. And we will only know when he makes his decision one way or the other.
Matthew, in your experience covering college basketball and the caliber of players in the Big 12, what is the typical timeline? How does that usually look when it comes to guys that do declare?
Usually they declare pretty soon after the season ends, but this has been a different period because usually the declaration period is earlier this month, in a typical NBA timeline. But because the NBA season started later, because the playoffs are ending in July, because the draft is in July, because they haven't quite reset to the normal schedule, they pushed back the declaration period to the end of the month. And now that you have the unfettered transfer rule, athletes have other things they can weigh too. For instance, Jalen Coleman Lands, who was the second leading scorer at Iowa State last year, he was debating whether he would even come back and use his COVID year because he's played 6 years of college basketball. He started at Illinois, went to DePaul, went to Iowa State. He's now transferred to Kansas, but his name is still in the draft pool. So he can go to the NBA, he can go to Kansas, or he could just kind of, tie off like a calf and say, I'm done, I'm out. So there's more to weigh now for these kids than there was maybe a couple of years ago. So that could be part of why it's taking Jared longer to make his decision, or maybe he just wants to be really dramatic and do it at the last minute.
You know, Matthew, I'm looking elsewhere across the conference at guys that either should have transferred or should have gone or have made announcements, and most everybody has pretty much declared where they're going to go. I mean, I think Mac McClung is really one of the more recent ones that I'm looking at as a guy that made a pretty monumental decision that's going to affect his respective program. That being said, Jared Butler, having not yet said anything, is that really the biggest news when it comes to pro prospects out of the Big 12 this offseason?
That's it. I mean, that's the one guy we're waiting on. Now the next stage after that will be after the deadline in the 30th. If you haven't hired an agent, and a lot of these Big 12 players who are in the draft pool have not hired an agent yet, they can actually go through the entire scouting process from meeting with teams to going through the NBA Combine in June to everything else that goes along with that. And they don't have to withdraw their name from the draft until July 19th. So they've got another month and a half to where they can weigh their options. So that becomes the next big waiting period for some of these guys like Sean McNeil at West Virginia and Taz Sherman at West Virginia. There are a lot of guys in the pool, Ochai Agbaji at Kansas. They've all left their eligibility open, so they're weighing their options. And because of the new rules that allows them to compete in the combine if they're invited, that gives them another data point to really figure out if the NBA is the right thing for them now or maybe a year or two from now.
Matthew, along with that, you got Matthew Meyer from Baylor, who has already declared that he would test draft waters but leave his eligibility open, not hire an agent. And we're now, again, 6 days away from really that time period where a guy's got to make a decision. And he's been effectively silent so far. Is that typical of a guy like, not a guy like Matthew Meyer, maybe personality-wise, but someone of his caliber athletically?
Well, I think that everybody agrees that he has the body type and the game to be an NBA player. I think the decision he's weighing is, does it make sense for me to go now, or does it make sense for me to go a year from now? And the nice thing for him is, like I said, even though he's in the draft pool, he doesn't have to take his name out till July 19th. So he has a month and a half to make a decision, and he can go through the entire scouting process and get his report card and then come back to Baylor. And Jared Butler used that information to great effect last year because he got a lot of great information from the league about what he needed to work on as a player. He was kind of considered a borderline first-round pick last year. Now he's a solid first-round pick. They told him he needed to shoot better from the mid-range. They told him he needed to become a better defender. They told him he needed to, show that he could run the point more. He did all those things during the season this past year for Baylor, winning a national championship. So he took the feedback from the league and he improved. Mayer's the same way. He could take all that feedback and improve as a player next year. He's doing exactly what he should be doing because I don't think he's a draftable player this year. Not that he's not an NBA caliber prospect, but this is such a deep draft when it comes to college talent because some of the ones that would have gone early last year stuck around another year because of COVID. So players like a Macio Teague, who, to me is a late first, early second round guy, honestly, he might not get drafted because there are so many good college players in this draft and so few good international players in this draft that some of these guys who might be taken in normal drafts are going to get pushed out of the draft and become undrafted free agents.
Matthew, looking at Matthew Meyer and what you've seen from him in the collegiate game, say he goes this year, he's teetering right now at that 60th pick. I mean, he would be lucky, in my opinion, to be drafted. With his body type and what you've seen of him on the floor, what is his ceiling when it comes to NBA draft next season?
Next season, honestly, he could be a first-round pick because what scouts, I think, are going to tell him they like his length. They like his three-point shooting. You love a 6'7", 6'8" guy that can shoot as well as he can shoot from the three-point line. You love the fact that he can put the ball on the floor and drive to the basket. He plays good defense. He's got good floor instincts. I think what scouts are going to tell him to work on is probably being a little bit more assertive offensively. Now, he's played with a lot of assertive players the last few years, so you can't really blame him for being more of a secondary option in this offense. I think given the opportunity to be an assertive player, he can be a more assertive player. And I think they're going to want him to become a bit more of a show that he can be a bit more of a rim protector as opposed to just being an on-ball defender. So I don't think he has to do a lot of fine-tuning to his game because he already has the kind of game that NBA scouts like from a large small forward or a small power forward. He can kind of fit into both of those spots. But I think they're going to want to see improvement defensively, protecting the rim. and showing you can be more assertive on offense, especially one-on-one.
Matthew, back to the Jared Butler front, the fact that he did declare last year very early on in that process to at least test the draft waters, does that make it even more puzzling that he's not made a decision yet, or is that something you've seen across collegiate basketball?
I've seen that before. I mean, I think when you declare that early and you leave your eligibility open, I think you're pretty much telegraphing to your coach there at college, in this case, Scott Drew, that, chances are good I'm coming back. I just want to see what kind of feedback I get, because you can't get that feedback from the NBA until you declare. So you have to put your name in the pool to get into the scouting process, go through, the kind of scouting feedback you get from the NBA and from individual teams. You can't get that any other way. So when you declare as early as he did last year, that told me he's probably coming back and just wants to get his report card so he can get better. Because what I think a lot of folks don't understand is that the NBA draft is only 60 picks. It's 2 rounds. And there's a lot more security in being a lottery pick than there is in being a mid-first round pick. There's a little more security in being a mid to late first round pick than there is in being a second round pick from a contract standpoint. It's a big difference between a first round pick and a second round pick. And when you don't get drafted, if you're out of eligibility, you're pretty much out there on your own. It worked out for Freddie Gillespie this year. He went from being a G League guy to being a part-time starter for the Raptors at the end of the season, but it doesn't always work out for every player that goes through that process.
Matthew, you mentioned that. I mean, Freddie Gillespie and what he's done in the NBA already, earning a contract from the Raptors, being able to go G League, D3, D1 G League, all the way here to the NBA. And that now I look at a guy like Mark Vidal that's trying to do what I would say is comparable from Baylor to the league and trying to build his way up. I mean, when it comes to Mark Vidal or Maceo Teague, do either of those guys get drafted? And really, what is their path to possibly playing pro basketball?
I think there's a strong chance that Teague gets drafted. It might not be till the second round, but I think there's a chance he gets drafted. And I think one thing that scouts are really going to focus on is his shot. He's got that little hitch in it. And here's what a scout told me a long time ago. There are guys out there who shoot the ball a million different ways. As long as it's repeatable and it's successful, I don't worry about it. Look at Tyrese Halliburton, Iowa State. He had a different kind of shot coming out of college. Kings really didn't mess with it that much. He's a Rookie of the Year finalist. His shot was repeatable and successful. Maceo's shot is the same way. You combine his defense, his ball handling ability, the fact that he can play both guard positions, I think there's a distinct possibility that he gets drafted. He just might have to wait until the second round to get drafted. As for Vidal, I don't think he gets drafted. That said, I don't think he'll be waiting very long to get a training camp invite or an off-season contract from an NBA team. Even though he's not the kind of player that can create his own shot offensively, he can do everything else. Rebound, defend, shot block. I mean, for crying out loud, he does the alley-oop dunk at 6'5". The thing is, once you get past your top 2 or 3 players in the NBA on your team, you're looking for guys who can fill roles. You're looking for your 3-and-D guy, your backup center, your backup point guard, your backup defensive guard. And he's a guy, because he can do so many different things for you, he can fill 2 or 3 of those spots with just one person. I see him as somebody who ends up with a team that values defense and rebounding and all those intangible things that he provides, probably playing on a 2-way contract, which means he can go between the G League and the NBA during a normal season. And, maybe he might end up being that guy that plays for 10 or 15 years and has 2 or 3 NBA championship rings, because he does all the dirty work that some guys just don't want to do.
The big Zach Randolph kind of guy. I mean, at 6'5", though, how much does that stifle what Vidal could do in the NBA?
It'll stifle him to a certain degree, because he's just not a guy that can create his own shot. But I see him as the guy that you play 10, 15 minutes a game, and you put him in for your best off guard, and you make sure that when he comes in, he's defending the other team's best guard, because you want to make those 10 or 15 minutes for that opposing guard as tortuous for him as possible. There are very few guards in the NBA that can rebound the way he can. I can tell you that right now, just watching the NBA a lot. That's going to be something that teams are going to be very, very interested in from his perspective. And he's an incredibly good defensive player. He's going to pick up 3 or 4 loose balls in a game just from effort. And not every NBA player out there, frankly, puts forth that kind of effort to get on the floor like he does and grab loose balls. There's a lot of intangibles that won't be in a box score that'll probably lead some NBA fans to question why he's even on a roster. But those things are valuable to NBA GMs and their coach. Honestly, a coach like Rick Carlisle in Dallas would love him. Absolutely love playing him 10 or 12 minutes a game and just say, go defend that guy, make his life miserable, and then come back and see me in a few minutes.
Matthew, when it comes to Davion Mitchell, I mean, his intangibles, the defense that he's brought, and now his elevated shot that he's shown, a lot of mock drafts have him in that 5 to 10 range. I think 5 may be a little bit high, 10 a little bit low. But with him, I mean, what do you see from Davion Mitchell that's going to make him a solid NBA guy? And does he have playing prospect in year one if he lands in that 7 or 8 range?
If he lands in that range, he's going to play. I don't see a team in the top 10, and admittedly, we haven't had the lottery yet. That happens in June. I don't see a team that would likely be among that top 10 that wouldn't need help on the perimeter. So I think the reason that he's ahead of Butler now is just the way his shot has ballooned percentage-wise from last year to this year. He showed a great deal of improvement in his three-point shot, and in the NBA, you know, you need to have a mid-range game, but it's not as emphasized with guards as much as making the three-point shot. So the fact that he can shoot well from three, defend, run the point, play off guard, do all these really, you know, good things in combination, it makes him attractive to a team like Toronto, who in the last mock draft that I saw, he was attached to them at number 9. The Raptors could use some help on the perimeter. Maybe he doesn't start right away because the Raptors are already a fairly good team. But, you know, he plays, to me, he plays 15 to 20 minutes right off the bat, you know, barring injury or barring just an inability to grasp what his team wants from him, which I honestly don't think will happen.
And then looking elsewhere across the conference, you know, that every week there are 3 or 4 guys that end up coming out and saying, hey, either I'm transferring, I'm going to the NBA, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. Looking at, you got Texas Tech gets Daniel Batcho, Oklahoma, Alondas Williams off to Wake Forest, and then Jalen Coleman lands. I mean, I don't know what's going on between Kansas and Iowa State right now, but we're just throwing guys back and forth. What do you make of those moves, and will any of those really be how big will those be for each team?
Well, Coleman lands he has potential to make a big impact on Kansas because he's a good scorer. He's a good defender. He could be taking Ochai Agbaji's spot in the starting lineup if he decides to go to the NBA. If he decides to come back, then it's him and Coleman lands in the backcourt. So they've got a really solid tandem there, plus some of the other transfers they brought in. They've brought a lot of offense in from a transfer standpoint, but Coleman lands really fits something they needed, a player that can shoot the three, defend, and drive to the basket. Batcho didn't play at all last year. So he's a very unknown quantity, you know, going to Texas Tech. He's going to get playing time because they've turned over that roster, you know, pretty much about halfway from what it was after Chris Beard left. He played well in Europe. He's shown himself to be a double-double type of player in the European game. It remains to be seen whether he could actually translate that into the American game. But the thing is, because he redshirted last year and they're getting the extra year of COVID, I think he might have 5 years of eligibility left. It's sometimes hard to track all that. And then looking at Alondas Williams moving to Wake Forest, good player, hurts Oklahoma because he was a part-time starter and a good perimeter player for them, and because when you consider that Harmon had left, Manick had left, Reeves had left, he was in line to play a lot of minutes next year had he stayed at Oklahoma. But moving to Wake Forest, he's going to move to one of the premier conferences in college basketball. I don't know that his playing time is going to go up, honestly, with the Demon Deacons, but at least he'll get to see Brady again, at least once next season when they play each other, whether it be in Winston-Salem or in Chapel Hill.
Nice. Well, Matthew, before we let you get out of here, we got our Bear Games question of the day. You know, Baylor men's tennis just played the national championship, so we're focusing on them. If you've got to take those guys to celebrate, you're helping them celebrate, you're taking them out to a restaurant somewhere, anywhere in the country. I mean, you could fly them to New York if you wanted to, or you could go down the street here to Arby's. Either or. I mean, where are you taking these guys to help celebrate Baylor men's tennis?
Oh, wow. Let's think about this for a second here. I think that I would. Oh, well, no, let's take them to Wimbledon. I mean, there's got to be a pub nearby. There's probably a pub a block away from Wimbledon. Let's get some fish and chips in them, get them some beer, and get them a day pass at Wimbledon. I'm sure they would enjoy the heck out of that. That'd be a nice celebration for a tennis team coming off a national championship.
Boom, Wimbledon. Yeah, that's the best answer we've gotten so far today. The most applicable, I guess. That works for me plenty, and I'm sure it will for them too. Matthew Postins, thanks so much for joining the show as always. Love getting your basketball takes.
All right, thanks. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Again, Matthew Postins of Heartland College Sports joining the show as always on your Monday. When we come back, Alex Gruskin, national tennis analyst of Great Shot Pod, joins the show again to talk to us about, Baylor men's tennis, who competed in a national championship over the weekend. I'm Drake Toll. We got Marquise Cooley, Andrew Robertson, Armstrong Sims, and Jack McKenzie. Don't go anywhere. This is Up Tempo.
Just steps away from